every Zelda game owes its existence to a single Super Nintendo cartridge. Released in 1991, A Link to the Past didn't just save a struggling franchise, it invented the DNA that would define Hyrule for the next 3 decades. The Master Sword, the Triforce's true purpose, the eternal cycle of hero and villain, none of it existed before this game. And yet, somehow, Nintendo made it feel like these elements had always been there, waiting in legend. That's not accident, that's design genius. And the truth about how deeply A Link to the Past shaped everything that came after reveals a blueprint so perfect, Nintendo is still following it today. Before A Link to the Past, the Zelda series was in trouble. The original Legend of Zelda on NES was revolutionary, offering players unprecedented freedom to explore a vast overworld filled with secrets. But its sequel, Zelda 2: The Adventure of Link, took a controversial detour into side-scrolling action and RPG mechanics that alienated many fans. Sales declined, and the franchise's future looked uncertain. Nintendo needed to recapture the magic, and they needed to do it definitively. What director Takashi Tezuka and producer Shigeru Miyamoto created went far beyond recapturing that magic. A Link to the Past established the foundational mythology that would anchor the entire franchise. Before this game, Zelda lore was minimal, scattered pieces without coherent connection. The first game featured Ganon and Zelda but offered little context about who they were or why their conflict mattered beyond the immediate crisis. A Link to the Past changed everything by introducing the concept that would become central to understanding Hyrule itself, the eternal struggle between 3 forces represented by 3 individuals. The game opens with a backstory that feels ancient and mythological. Long ago, 3 golden goddesses descended upon the chaos that existed before Hyrule and created order. Din, the goddess of power, cultivated the land and created the Red Earth. Nehru, the goddess of wisdom, poured her intelligence into the world to give the spirit of law. Farore, the goddess of courage, created all life forms to uphold the law. When their work was complete, the goddesses departed, leaving behind the Triforce, a sacred golden triangle that grants the wishes of whoever touches it. This wasn't just world building, this was Nintendo creating a creation myth for their fantasy world that rivaled actual religious cosmology in scope and gravitas. But the Triforce's power came with consequences. The game's backstory continues. A great war erupted as people fought to claim the Triforce for themselves. To end the bloodshed, the King of Hyrule ordered 7 wise men to seal the entrance to the sacred realm where the Triforce rested. Peace returned to Hyrule, and the location of the sacred realm faded into legend, until an evil thief named Ganondorf discovered the entrance. He murdered his followers to ensure he alone would claim the Triforce, and when he touched it, the sacred realm transformed into the Dark World, a twisted reflection of his malevolent heart. This is where A Link to the Past established the trinity that defines Zelda, the hero with courage, the princess with wisdom, and the villain with power. It wasn't the first game to feature Link, Zelda, and Ganon, but it was the first to explain why these 3 individuals are destined to clash across ages. The Triforce splits into 3 pieces, representing power, wisdom, and courage. When someone with an unbalanced heart touches the complete Triforce, it splits. The piece that reflects their strongest trait stays with them, while the other pieces go to individuals who embody those qualities. Ganondorf's lust for power meant the Triforce of power adhered to him. The Triforce of wisdom went to Princess Zelda, descended from the 7 wise men who sealed the sacred realm. And the Triforce of courage? It awaited a hero yet to emerge. This framework became the backbone for nearly every subsequent Zelda game. Ocarina of Time, released 7 years later, would explicitly show this splitting of the Triforce. Wind Waker's entire plot revolves around reassembling the scattered Triforce pieces. Twilight Princess features Ganondorf bearing the Triforce of power even after his execution. Skyward Sword, despite being a prequel, maintains this structure, with the goddess Hylia choosing a hero and reincarnating as Zelda. Even Breath of the Wild and Tears of the Kingdom, which soft reboot many Zelda conventions, preserve the essential triangle: Link's courage to face impossible odds, Zelda's wisdom and divine power, and Ganondorf's overwhelming destructive power. But A Link to the Past didn't just define who these characters are, it defined what they fight over, and it introduced the Master Sword as the ultimate arbiter of that conflict. Before A Link to the Past, the Master Sword didn't exist. The original Zelda featured various swords Link could obtain, with the magical sword being the most powerful. Nothing about them suggested legendary significance or divine craftsmanship. A Link to the Past changed this by introducing a blade that transcends simple weaponry, the Blade of Evil's Bane, forged by ancient smiths and imbued with sacred power specifically to defeat evil. The game tells players that only a hero can draw the Master Sword from its pedestal in the Lost Woods, establishing the Arthurian parallel that Nintendo would embrace fully in later titles. The Master Sword serves a specific purpose in A Link to the Past's lore. It's the only weapon capable of truly destroying Ganon. Link can damage him with other equipment, but the Master Sword is required to strike the final blow. This establishes a pattern repeated throughout the franchise. Ganondorf can be sealed, imprisoned, or temporarily defeated, but permanent victory requires the sacred blade forged to combat evil. Ocarina of Time expanded on this by making the Master Sword the key to time travel and the weapon that seals Ganondorf for 7 years. Wind Waker required Link to restore the sword's power before facing Ganondorf in their legendary rooftop duel. Twilight Princess transformed the blade into a tool for dispelling Twilight corruption. Skyward Sword gave the sword an origin story, revealing it as the transformed spirit Phi, forged from the goddess sword through sacred flames. The Master Sword became so iconic that its absence becomes noteworthy. Majora's Mask deliberately excludes it because Link has left Hyrule. The Four Swords games feature a different legendary blade. Breath of the Wild's deteriorated Master Sword, cracked and weakened, serves as a visual representation of Hyrule's fallen state. Even games that don't feature the Master Sword often include spiritual successors: the Four Sword, the Phantom Sword, the Lokomoe Sword. A Link to the Past established that Zelda games need a legendary blade at their center, and that expectation has persisted for over 30 years. Then there's the innovation that truly set A Link to the Past apart from everything that came before: the Light World and Dark World. Players begin in Hyrule, exploring a colorful, vibrant kingdom filled with towns, forests, mountains, and deserts. The overworld is expansive and inviting, encouraging exploration. Then, roughly halfway through the game, Link gains access to the Dark World, and everything changes. The Dark World is geographically identical to the Light World, but aesthetically and tonally inverted. Towns become ruins, helpful characters become monsters, lush forests transform into twisted deadwood, water turns poisonous. The Dark World isn't just a late-game area, it's a corrupted mirror of everything players have come to know, a manifestation of what happens when Ganon's evil corrupts the sacred realm. This dual-world concept became one of the most influential design elements in Zelda history. Ocarina of Time uses time travel to similar effect, with adult Link exploring a Hyrule devastated by 7 years of Ganondorf's rule. Castletown's market becomes populated by redeads. The serene Temple of Time stands abandoned. Death Mountain erupts with fire. Players see the direct consequences of failure rendered in environmental storytelling. Twilight Princess takes the concept even further with the Twilight Realm, an alternate dimension of shadow that Link must navigate in wolf form. The contrast between Hyrule's green fields and the Twilight's muted grays creates the same emotional impact A Link to the Past achieved 13 years earlier. Even modern Zelda games embrace this duality. A Link Between Worlds, a direct sequel to A Link to the Past, features travel between Hyrule and Lorule, parallel kingdoms with opposite fates. Tears of the Kingdom introduces the Depths, a vast underground mirror of the surface world, where every mountain becomes a chasm and every landmark has a shadowy equivalent. The specific implementation changes, but the core concept remains. Showing players two versions of the same world creates powerful contrast and deepens environmental storytelling. A Link to the Past also established how corrupted realms connect to the series' central villain. The Dark World exists because Ganon touched the Triforce with an evil heart, transforming the sacred realm into a reflection of his malevolence. This explains why evil keeps returning to Hyrule. Ganon doesn't just want power, he corrupts everything he touches, spreading his influence like a disease. Ocarina of Time's sacred realm becomes a twisted hellscape under Ganondorf's rule. Wind Waker's flooded Hyrule represents the kingdom's death. Twilight Princess shows an alternate dimension literally invading Hyrule. Tears of the Kingdom's gloom corrupts the land itself, seeping from the depths to poison the surface. The Light and Dark World also introduced a game mechanic that would define the series, using dimensional travel to solve puzzles. Link can't simply exist in the Dark World. Without the Moon Pearl, he transforms into a helpless pink rabbit. Certain obstacles in one world can only be bypassed by traveling to the corresponding location in the other world. A boulder blocking a cave in the Light World might not exist in the Dark World. A chasm in the Dark World might be solid ground in the Light World. This forces players to think spatially across two dimensions, solving puzzles that span realities. Every subsequent game borrowed this idea. Ocarina of Time requires switching between child and adult timelines to access different areas. Oracle of Ages uses time travel for puzzle solving. Twilight Princess needs wolf transformations to access specific areas. A Link Between Worlds lets Link merge into walls, effectively adding a third dimension to navigate. Breath of the Wild uses stasis and magnesis to manipulate objects in ways that feel like altering reality.
The specifics change, but the core concept, using special abilities to perceive and interact with the world differently, traces directly back to A Link to the Past's Moon Pearl and Magic Mirror. Beyond its mythology and world design, A Link to the Past established the very structure of how Zelda games unfold. The game perfected the formula that defines the series: explore an overworld, discover dungeons, obtain items that grant new abilities, use those abilities to solve environmental puzzles, defeat bosses, and progress to new areas previously inaccessible. The original Legend of Zelda had elements of this structure, but A Link to the Past refined it into a precise science. Consider the game's dungeon design. Each dungeon in A Link to the Past introduces new mechanics and obstacles while building on skills learned in previous dungeons. The Eastern Palace teaches basic puzzle solving with simple block puzzles and enemy patterns. The Desert Palace introduces the player to more complex switch mechanisms. The Tower of Hera adds vertical navigation and falling hazards. By the time players reach the Dark World dungeons, the game expects mastery of layered, multi-room puzzles that require careful observation and experimentation. Every dungeon contains a special item that becomes essential both for completing that dungeon and for accessing new areas of the overworld. The hook shot lets Link cross gaps and pole himself to distant platforms. The fire rod ignites torches and defeats ice-based enemies. The cane of Samaria creates blocks that can trigger switches or serve as stepping stones. This item-gated progression creates a satisfying loop: explore until blocked, enter dungeon, obtain item, unlock new areas of the world. Ocarina of Time, Majora's Mask, Wind Waker, Twilight Princess all follow this exact template established by A Link to the Past. The game also balanced linearity with exploration in ways that influenced future design philosophy. The first 3 dungeons must be completed in order, teaching players the basics, but once Link reaches the Dark World, the remaining dungeons can be tackled in various sequences, allowing players some freedom in how they approach challenges. This partial non-linearity became a hallmark of later games. Wind Waker lets players approach certain dungeons in different orders. A Link Between Worlds takes this further, allowing most dungeons to be completed in any sequence. Breath of the Wild fully embraces non-linearity by making all content theoretically accessible from the start, though this radical departure took decades to achieve. A Link to the Past's influence on puzzle design can't be overstated. The game taught players to observe their environment carefully, to experiment with different items in various contexts, and to think creatively about spatial relationships. Pushing blocks onto switches seems obvious now because A Link to the Past trained generations of players in this language. Lighting torches in specific sequences, bombing cracked walls, using keys strategically when multiple locked doors exist, these weren't universal gaming conventions. A Link to the Past established them as Zelda conventions, and the series has built on this vocabulary ever since. The boss battles in A Link to the Past also set precedents. Each boss requires observing patterns, identifying weaknesses, and using specific strategies or items. Moldorm must be attacked from behind as it thrashes around a confined arena. Helmasorm, King, requires removing its mask with bombs before damaging its vulnerable core. Blind must be attacked in specific phases as it attempts to flee the room. These aren't just tests of reflexes, they're puzzle battles that require understanding mechanics. This approach to boss design became standard in the series, with bosses often built around the dungeon's special item. Then there's the game's approach to storytelling, which established narrative patterns that persist today. A Link to the Past tells most of its story through brief dialogue exchanges and environmental clues rather than lengthy cutscenes. Link receives telepathic messages from Princess Zelda, trapped in the castle's dungeon, creating urgency without interrupting gameplay. The backstory about the imprisoning war unfolds through text crawl at the game's opening, setting context without forcing players through unskippable exposition. This approach, providing enough story to contextualize player actions without overshadowing gameplay, became the standard Zelda balancing act. The game also established Princess Zelda's role as more than a prize to be rescued. While Zelda is imprisoned for much of the game, her telepathic guidance proves crucial to Link's success. She serves as oracle and advisor, demonstrating wisdom even while helpless. When Link rescues the 7 maidens descended from the 7 wise men, they combine their power to break Ganon's barrier, with Zelda's guidance coordinating their efforts. This positions Zelda as a magical and strategic asset, rather than simply a damsel in distress, a characterization that evolved further in later games where she becomes a warrior, a pirate, a ninja, and eventually the Deuteragonist in Tears of the Kingdom.
A Link to the Past also solidified Ganon's identity as an eternal, recurring evil. The game's backstory explains that Ganon was once Ganondorf, a human thief who discovered the Triforce and transformed into a demon through his evil wishes. After his initial defeat, he's sealed away, but the game's plot begins with the wizard Aghanim working to break that seal and resurrect Ganon. Link defeats Ganon at the game's climax, but the ending hints that evil may one day return if Ganon's heart persists. This established the pattern of Ganon or Ganondorf as a cyclical threat, sealed, resurrected, defeated, and sealed again across ages. The villain might be imprisoned in the Sacred Realm, beneath the ocean, in the Twilight Realm, or underground, but he always finds a way back. This eternal recurrence gives the Zelda timeline its mythological weight. Evil isn't permanently destroyed. Each hero must face the same darkness their predecessors fought. The concept of reincarnation and destiny became central to Zelda lore because of how A Link to the Past framed its conflict. While the game doesn't explicitly use the word reincarnation, it establishes that the hero who wields the Master Sword is chosen by fate. The sword cannot be drawn by those unworthy. Only one with courage in their heart can claim it. This implied that Link isn't simply a brave young man. He's someone destined for heroism, touched by the goddess's design. Ocarina of Time made this explicit by having Link receive the Triforce of Courage. Skyward Sword revealed the origin. Demise's dying curse ensures that an incarnation of his hatred will forever rise to plague those descended from the goddess and the hero. This curse explains why Link, Zelda, and Ganondorf appear in various eras, locked in eternal conflict. And it all started because A Link to the Past suggested these 3 individuals weren't random people caught in crisis. They were the inevitable actors in a cosmic drama. The game's map design also influenced how future Zelda titles structure their worlds. Hyrule in A Link to the Past is dense with content. Nearly every screen contains something: a cave to explore, a secret to uncover, a chest hidden behind bushes, a puzzle requiring specific items. The overworld isn't just connective tissue between dungeons, it's a legitimate space for adventure. Players can spend hours just exploring, finding heart pieces, discovering hidden upgrades, and uncovering optional content. This philosophy of rewarding exploration became central to Zelda's identity.
Wind Waker's Great Sea hides treasure on countless islands. Twilight Princess fills Hyrule Field with hidden caves and grottos. Breath of the Wild takes this to its extreme with 900 Korok seeds and shrines scattered across every corner of the map. A Link to the Past also introduced quality of life features that became standard. The ability to assign items to two buttons, Y and B on the SNES controller, allowed for more dynamic gameplay than the original Zelda's single item system. The map and compass in each dungeon reveal the layout and chest locations, helping players navigate without feeling lost. Heart containers increase Link's health, providing a sense of progression. Bottles store potions and fairies for emergency healing. Magic items consume a magic meter, adding resource management. These weren't revolutionary individually, but together they created a refined experience that subsequent games built upon rather than replaced. Even the game's aesthetic influenced the series' visual identity. A Link to the Past's colorful 16-bit sprites and detailed environments set the standard for how Hyrule should look, vibrant, inviting, and full of personality. The contrast between the light world's pastoral beauty and the dark world's oppressive corruption established a visual language for good versus evil. Later games in different graphical styles still honor this aesthetic foundation. Ocarina of Time's Kokiri Forest feels safe and welcoming, while the Shadow Temple radiates menace. Wind Waker's cel-shaded art maintains visual clarity and charm. Breath of the Wild's rolling fields and towering mountains echo A Link to the Past's sense of wonder and scope. The game's music also established themes that composer Koji Kondo would revisit throughout the series. The overworld theme captures adventure and heroism. The dark world theme sounds ominous and urgent. Zelda's Lullaby appears as a haunting melody. These aren't just memorable tunes, they're musical motifs representing concepts within Hyrule's mythology. Later games reference these melodies constantly. Ocarina of Time uses Zelda's Lullaby as a magical ocarina song. The main theme from A Link to the Past reappears in multiple games. Even Breath of the Wild, which abandons traditional Zelda music for ambient piano, includes subtle references to classic melodies. The game's influence extends to how Nintendo approaches the Zelda timeline itself. When Nintendo finally published an official timeline in Hyrule Historia, A Link to the Past was positioned as the first game in the Downfall timeline, the branch where the hero of time fails to defeat Ganondorf in Ocarina of Time. This placement reveals something crucial. Nintendo designed future games to fit around A Link to the Past's established lore, not the other way around. The game is so foundational that the timeline literally splits to accommodate it. Whether discussing the Imprisoning War, the Sealing of Ganon, or the Master Sword's purpose, later games reference A Link to the Past's version of events as canonical truth.
Consider how specific elements from A Link to the Past appear in later titles as direct homages. A Link Between Worlds is explicitly set in the same Hyrule generations later, with the same geography and references to past events. Four Swords Adventures features a similar dark world. The Legend of Zelda Link's Awakening, released shortly after A Link to the Past, uses the same game engine and visual style. Oracle of Ages and Oracle of Seasons borrow heavily from A Link to the Past's mechanics. Even the recent remakes and remasters prioritize A Link to the Past, recognizing its special status within the franchise. The game's impact goes beyond mechanics and lore. It established what Zelda stories are fundamentally about. At its core, A Link to the Past is about a young person rising to meet a destiny they didn't choose. Link doesn't want to be a hero. He's awakened in the middle of the night by Zelda's telepathic call for help. He sets out to rescue his uncle, only to watch that uncle die, passing on his sword and shield. Link doesn't seek adventure, adventure finds him. But once called, he doesn't refuse. He faces overwhelming evil with courage, even when success seems impossible. This reluctant hero archetype became Link's defining characteristic across every game. Whether he's a forest child, a ranch hand, a train engineer, or a royal guard, Link is always an ordinary person called to extraordinary purpose. The game also established that Zelda games are about cycles and history. The Imprisoning War happened before the game begins, but its consequences define the present crisis. Past heroes fought similar battles. Ancient sages sealed evil away. Future generations will face similar challenges.
This creates a sense that Hyrule's history is deep and meaningful, that the player's actions are part of a larger tapestry. Every Zelda game since has embraced this approach. Players uncover ancient ruins, learn forgotten history, and realize their quest connects to events from ages past. The series became about heritage, legacy, and the weight of history. Perhaps most importantly, A Link to the Past established that Zelda games are about restoring balance. Ganon's corruption of the sacred realm threw the world out of balance, turning it into the Dark World. Link's quest isn't just about defeating evil, it's about restoring natural order. When Link uses the Triforce at the game's end, the Dark World transforms back into the Sacred Realm. The corrupted land heals. People transformed into monsters regain their true forms. Evil is purged and balance returns. This theme of restoration appears in nearly every subsequent game. Link cleanses temples, purifies corrupted lands, awakens sages, and restores light to darkened realms. The hero's journey is about healing a wounded world, not just vanquishing a villain. A Link to the Past didn't just influence Zelda games, its impact rippled through the entire gaming industry. The action-adventure genre as it exists today owes enormous debt to the systems and conventions this game established. Games from Darksiders to Okami to Crosscode borrow the Zelda formula. Overworld exploration, dungeon puzzles, item-gated progression, and epic boss battles. The design language A Link to the Past perfected became industry standard. 30 decades after its release, A Link to the Past remains relevant. New players discovering it for the first time are often shocked by how modern it feels. The controls are tight, the puzzles are clever, the world feels alive, the story resonates. This isn't a relic preserved through nostalgia, it's a genuinely excellent game that transcends its era because the fundamentals are timeless. The design principles Nintendo established here, tight controls, fair challenges, rewarding exploration, and meaningful progression, are still what make games feel good to play in 2026. The truth about A Link to the Past's lasting lore is this: it's not just influential, it's foundational. The Master Sword, the Triforce's trinity, the cycle of hero and villain, the concept of parallel worlds, the structure of dungeons and exploration, the aesthetic identity of Hyrule, all of it crystallized in this single game. Nintendo took the experimental foundation of the original Zelda and refined it into something so perfectly balanced that they've spent 30 years iterating on this formula rather than replacing it. Breath of the Wild and Tears of the Kingdom represent radical reinventions of Zelda gameplay, yet even they preserved the core elements A Link to the Past established: the Master Sword, the Triforce's significance, Ganondorf as the eternal evil, Zelda's wisdom, Link's courage, and the fundamental conflict over Hyrule's fate. A Link to the Past didn't just save the Zelda franchise, it defined it. Every game that came after exists in its shadow, built on its foundation, expanding its mythology. When developers at Nintendo sit down to create a new Zelda game, they're not asking what should we do differently, they're asking how do we honor what A Link to the Past established while offering something new. That's the mark of a true masterpiece. Not that people remember it fondly, but that it becomes so fundamental to its medium that everything after it must define itself in relation to it. A Link to the Past created the blueprint for what Zelda is, and that blueprint remains as relevant today as it was in 1991. The legend continues because the legend began here, in earnest, with a purple-haired hero in a rain-soaked Hyrule answering a princess's call for help and changing gaming history forever.